Hello guys and welcome back to another episode of Supercoach, mates. Well, round 15's done and dusted. We've got our full 9 games back. I think pretty much everyone's at full premium now. And we've got both Thomas and Jonas here. So before we get stuck into the games of the week, we'll just quickly touch on how we went. So just to score a good player and a bad player. I'll start with you, Thomas. How did you go this week?
Pretty well, considering I didn't have English playing. I scored 2,467.
Very good.
Which was, pretty solid. Couldn't complain with that. Got into the top 10K, which I've had a pretty bad year. So considering how the years went, you take that. Someone that's done well was a person I traded in was Goldstein. Had a few issues with him potentially, playing Riley O'Brien and kind of breaking even with him. But pretty surprised. We scored did really well, 120. Can't complain with that at all. And hopefully continues to that form going into the latter half of the season. I guess the disappointing one was, probably Jaden Short and Jack Crisp were the two that were disappointing from a scoring point of view. I think Short's someone that if I had more trades or if I can hold off a little longer and trade him off, because he seemed to have suffered a little bit with his new midfield role. It just seems like he isn't scoring as well as what he used to. But I guess in my situation, I've got 4 trades left and no real issues with injuries. So I guess in this situation, I'm not going to offset him yet, but I don't have much money in the bank at all because I got Goldie in as my final kind of injury trade so far to date. So I won't be looking to offset him yet. But yeah, he's been disappointing so far. So hopefully he can bounce back. And I guess it was a tough game. It wasn't an easiest game to deal with. But yeah, his midfield role is a bit of a concern in regards to Supercoach scoring.
Yeah, and how about you, Jonas? How did you go?
I scored around 2,400, so not bad as well, all things considering. Hopefully Parrish can return for me this week. As for a player who impressed me, maybe not like with his scoring, but Connor McDonald was a handy inclusion for me. Otherwise, I would have copped a 0 this week. And he scored probably, I think, his best score for the year with a 67, so we take that. As for a disappointment, Luke Parker wasn't great. And, Isaac Cummings scored 97, but Collingwood kicked about 22 points. So you'd hope for a slightly better score than that. But in the end, not disastrous. How about yourself?
Yeah, well, I got 23-35 from 21 players, which I didn't think was too bad. So my best player of the week, well, it's always nice when you have the captaincy on your highest scorer. So that was Roy Laird, which he's still a point of difference. I don't know how he's still a point of difference. He's in 13% of teams now. But that's insane for someone who's so consistent. And the rage, I'm actually going to give a clip to someone that I traded out last week, and that's Braden Proofs. All right. Now, Braden, okay, you've already been suspended twice this year. All right. Why did you have to literally deck English into the ground? You literally had him blindsided. You just had to wrap him up, and instead you go and fling him around. Now he's concussed, and that ended up costing me probably 3 of my leagues because of that. So I had to cop a 0 in the ruck. And it ended up costing me probably 3 league wins because of that. So, Braden, don't do that. All right? Not happy. All right. Enough of me raging. I'm going to bring up this. All right. So obviously, as I touched on, with everyone pretty much being at full sides, we're just going to look at maybe some players who we think might be good pickups, or good maybe points of differences to have that maybe a lot of people perhaps haven't got. So looking through this Melbourne game, I'm not really sure if there's anyone on here, to be honest. I would have said Christian Salem, but he's injured again, so I don't think you could go near there. Anyone from these games that you guys might saves a good point of difference?
I guess two players on that list that I guess you could look at for swap-ins would be what's his face, Oscar McInerney from the Lions, and Dan Rich as well. I guess those two done pretty well all season, but yeah, Dan Rich was the one that's been up and down all year. He kind of got 100 and then a low 90, not low 80 kind of score. So he's one I guess you could look at for a Tom Stewart replacement if you're going a little bit different. He's taken all the kickouts, even with Kadeem Coleman in the side. He doesn't seem to be that impacted by that. But Dan Rich is one that I guess you could bring in as an option. I want to hear your thoughts on that one, Jonas. And Oscar McInerney, Sol Ruck with Darcy Fort being played as a medi-sub a couple of times now. I don't know how long that'll stay the case or if they'll bring in Ford as well and play double ruck. I'm not sure of the situation there, but yeah, he done pretty well against Luke Jackson, who had an insane game. And it'd be interesting to see whether McInerney can continue that kind of solid scoring for the rest of the season, considering he's had a pretty poor year to date. But what are your thoughts on those two guys?
On McInerney and Rich?
Yeah.
Yeah. McInerney, I don't think he's the worst option, but I think if you're going to get him, it would have been last week for English. Otherwise, I assume English isn't playing this week, and I think you just hold him from here on out because you've already copped that 1 week of no English scoring. So I think, yeah, just wait it out 1 more week because he will definitely be back the week after, and he's a top forward/ruckman. As for Rich, as a Stewart replacement, I think he's definitely in good form, but he's quite expensive and his floor is pretty low. On top of that, he is pretty injury prone. Several times this year, I've seen him come to the bench with some sort of minor niggle. And if you're low on trades, I wouldn't be advocating picking someone like him or Aaron Hall because chances are they're going to get injured again. And so rather than say Daniel Rich, I'd be steering towards any of Dawson, Crisp, Sinclair, Doherty, Hewitt if you don't have them, Sisley even. But if you can't afford them, I'd still be going Aaron Hall over Rich and saving a bit of money given the fact that they're both injury prone. At least you've got the certainty of extra money in the bank. So one where you could go better, but he's not the worst option.
Yeah, so I think Daniel Rich had to get on last week. So he's 543,600. So you could have got him last week for 510. He's gonna go up again. He's break even 65. So he's only 9% aside. So again, these are players that where you think are sort of good points of difference that perhaps not a lot of people have. I think Daniel Rich does fit that, but I think he might be a little bit more expensive.
He's only averaging 102, so
yeah, 101,
and that's with a 3-round average of 124. So
yeah,
it's a bit of a hot patch. He'll probably regress back to 105, 110 range. So don't expect that sort of scoring each week.
Yeah, I think so. Moving on to the Bulldogs and Hawthorn game. So I'm going to touch on Tom Liberatore. So I had a look before. So he's a midfielder forward. I don't know how he's still only in 4% of size. He's a little bit inconsistent, but he literally changed that game for the Bulldogs on Friday night. I think if you've got English, I know you probably got to hold English, but if you just need the points, I think he'd just about be the way to go. I think Libo, if you're looking for a point of difference in the forward line or in the midfield, what do you guys think about that?
Yeah, he's an interesting one. He's one that I was going to get in if it wasn't for not knowing that English well. I mean, like, it's all well and good to say in hindsight, but yeah, if English was to miss 2 weeks, I would have probably bit the bullet and gotten Sean Darcy and Liberatore. But Libba's one that's probably benefiting a fair bit from Smith being out of the side. The big knock on him, I think, just from watching him as a neutral, is his disposal efficiency is pretty crap. And that's to do with the fact that he's in the guts a lot of the time and just hoofing the ball as far as he can. There's not much good efficiency in regards to that. That's why I guess, you look at his scores, their disposals, and a goal to crack 120. But yeah, he's one that I guess because he's playing forward, if this was a midfield, he's probably a non-option. But as a forward player, he's a good point of difference. And I guess unfortunately for owners who are, people that were contemplating the difference between him and Bontempelli's really starting to get the whips cracking to the point in the season. He's starting to dominate as well, as you can see there, the top scorer for the Dogs. So he's one, I guess, that is a valid option, but you've just got to keep in mind that Bailey Smith is on the back up. I think he comes back when they play us, unfortunately. So yeah, Libba's the upside is that he plays predominantly all midfield. He doesn't get thrown forward too much, but yeah, the downside is I guess his ceiling is a little bit impacted by his disposal efficiency.
The other thing on Libba, his fixture is pretty rough. His two lowest scores of the year came against Melbourne and Sydney, who he plays in the remaining few rounds. And yes, whilst some of that time was spent up forward, it is something you should consider, especially heading into league finals. You ideally want to have points of difference that have easy kills against, say, an Adelaide or a North Melbourne, and Liberatore doesn't play either of those two teams in the run home. So yes, he's relatively durable and he's scoring well, but he's quite expensive and one where his fixture isn't that favourable. So I wouldn't be expecting huge bonkers sort of scoring out of him. He might cop some attention from, say, a Harms type in a few weeks. So he's one where I think you've almost missed the boat on the good scoring in the last few weeks, given the fact that he's 550 something K. One where I'd probably be looking for if, say, you've got ample trades and you need one more forward and you're just looking for the highest scoring player. But if you're looking for some value, I'd be looking elsewhere because I expect some of that scoring to go back down with some of the tough matchups he has. And then, as Tom was speaking about, with Bailey Smith coming back in 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I guess the other conundrum with this too is obviously most of us probably have Dunkley, McRae, English, Bond. So I mean, how many Bulldogs players can you have? Can you fit Libba in with those four as well? What do you guys think? Like, do you think that's realistic, or do you think you're putting all your eggs in one basket? And the Bulldogs do have a tough draw home. I think they actually have the hardest draw in the way home. I think they play the top 7 sides. So, yeah. What do you guys? Can you pick him, or does the draw deter you off?
I think you can still pick him, but yeah, as Jonas said, Melbourne, Sydney, and even St Kilda is a little bit hard to score against, even as bad as we're going. You just look at the Sydney game. I mean, Parker and Mills scored sub-hundreds against us. So, yeah, he's got a pretty tough fixture. So it's one that I guess, like I've got Goldstein at F6 and he's one that I'm a little bit nervy about. So I guess Libba, you're paying for consistency a little bit, even though he has a bit of a downside. But as Jonas rightly said, the fixtures are a bit rough for the Dogs, and we've seen the bad side of the Dogs. Obviously, they're doing quite well at the moment, but they still have to play Melbourne, Sydney, and got a couple rough games coming up. So he's one that I guess is a bit touch and go with regards to bringing someone. If you've already got him in, no problems. You won't be training about anytime soon. But definitely one that there's maybe a few better options out there moving forwards, considering how many Dogs people already have in their sides.
Yeah, I think so too. And just touching on Hawthorn, so another forward here. I'm not going to throw to Jones for this one because we only know Jones's thoughts on this player. But Dylan Moore, he's only in 2.1% of sides. He's the 11th highest scoring forward of the year. What do we think about him, Thomas? If you're just scratching around, he's 442,000. What do you think about him?
Oh, Jones could probably answer that one.
Same answer as Jonas.
Yeah,
Yeah.
He's a good enough player, but he's not Supercoach relevant.
Yeah.
Just some of the forwards have been so ordinary, and he's had a few good games.
Yeah. So moving on to this West Coast and Essendon game, we'll quickly touch on Massimo D Ambrosio. So obviously because we've all got full premiums, we're not really worrying about rookies that much. But are you guys going to be bringing in Massimo this week, given he's 102k as a defender, and he can free up some money for you guys to use elsewhere and upgrading your size? Are you both going to be bringing him in, or are you passing on him, Jonas?
At this point of the year, it is a pass. The fact that he's a defender only doesn't really solve any of my problems because I'm covering English and Parish, and I've got Ware and Thompson down back at the moment. He's certainly a good option if you need defense cover though. But at this point in the year, you're only bringing in rookies to facilitate upgrading one of your premiums to a better premium, i.e. Short to Dawson or something, and Cripps to maybe Steele. So again, you're only looking at these sort of moves to bring in players to either cover a donut or bring in or upgrade a premium to another premium. And for that to happen, you should have at least 4 to 5 trades. Otherwise, you're sort of flirting with danger if you're just, say, downgrading Ware to D Ambrosio, and that's all you're doing. You're not really achieving much. You just got a bit of extra money in the bank, which you're not then using. So just be mindful of that as well. I'd be saving those trades for an emergency when you have, say, a donut and you need a cover. There'll be some rookie somewhere playing or debuting that you can bring in, and I'd just save it for that time.
Yep, I think if you've got probably less than 5 trades, I would probably go along with that. I have more than 5, so I'm in a little bit different here. But what about you, Thomas? Are you bringing him in, or are you passing as well?
Well, I already got him in as my last rookie upgrade, which was handy considering that he scored okay. And now my back line is nice, and the fact that whilst I've obviously missed out on Sicily and Stewart, I mean, Stewart we'll get to when we get to the Geelong-Richmond game, but having D Ambrosio and Ware as defensive cover is quite handy, especially if one of these defenders miss out for 1 to 2 weeks is nice leverage. But he's one, I guess, that he's probably the only rookie that you'd be looking towards downgrading. This week, price-wise, he's still 102k, so basement price can't go wrong. But yeah, as Jonas said, it's kind of a bit too late if you have 3 trades left and you can't really facilitate a one up, one down. But if you're in a position where you've got +5 and you've got one more rookie on field for whatever reason, or you're in an even luxurious position where you've got trades like 7+ and you've got a full side because you've been lucky with injuries or got all the good players in at the right time, there wouldn't be any reason why I wouldn't bring him in and upgrade an underperforming premium at this point of the year. But you're in a fortunate position if that's the case because of a basement rookie price. I mean, perfect downgrade opportunity.
Yeah, so I've brought him in this week to get Bontempelli in, which finishes my forward line, which is someone who I've been eyeing off for a few weeks, Bontempelli. I was a little bit disappointed that he went 136, but it is what it is. With both of these sides being not that great this year, I don't think there's really anyone here
One last
to
thing.
really touch on. Oh, yeah.
With all the rucks scoring well, I just want to give a quick shout out to our old friend Callum Jamieson.
Oh, yes.
Beat to score -4 in 57% game time. So shout out to you, mate.
Yeah, definitely probably not an ideal thing to have on your resume.
I think some people relied on Jamison as a sub through the show. You'd rather just cop the 0 at that point.
Yeah, I think so.
So,
This Carlton Fremantle game, which was a little bit of an upset, I think a lot of people thought that I think a lot of people here thought Fremantle would just walk over Carlton given the injuries that Carlton have. But so this is going a little bit off thing here. So Sam Walsh, I know he's the top scorer here, but he's still in only 11% of sides. Where would you guys rate him as being, say, in your list of, say, 8 midfielders? If you're scratching around, say you've got 7 midfielders, you need an 8th one. Would Walsh rate? How high would Walsh rate on your list to bring in Jonas? Where would he rate?
let's do this quickly. Having a look at the players in the midfield, I'll rank them 1 to 8 and disagree with me where you think I'm wrong. Number 1, Lachie Neale.
Yep, tick.
Number 2, Oliver.
Yep, tick.
Number 3, Rory Laird.
Yep, tick.
Number 4 would probably be maybe
McRae.
McRae.
Yep,
Yeah,
tick.
McRae goes in there for consistency.
Yeah.
5, sure. Okay. And then, so those are the top 5. At 6, you could have, I think Callum Mills deserves 6th spot.
Yep.
7 would be a toss-up between Tuke Miller and Sam Walsh, I'd say. And then I'd have Brayshaw slightly behind.
So I think that's probably.
Have I missed anyone?
No. So by the way,
I'd say
that's their only
Jack
2
Steele would be the
midfielders.
other one coming back from injury.
Yeah.
Would be one that you'd look at with that Brayshaw, even Petrarca leading into a final series. Maybe he starts really pumping out some impressive scores. But yeah, bar Walsh, the rest like Merritts, your Petrarcas, your Brayshaws.
Parrish,
I guess that
comes back.
Yeah, when Parrish comes back, he's over that injury as well.
Pre-injury, he would have probably been 6th. But yeah. So I think to answer your question, Walsh is around 7th to 9th mark, depending on how you feel about him.
Yeah, well, he's the 7th highest averaging midfielder. Obviously, he's missed the 1 game, but he's the 7th highest averaging midfielder. So I think that's enough said on Walsh. Yeah, I think what about you, Thomas? Are you the same boat? Is he someone you'd bring in if you were scratching around?
Yeah, he's obviously one that I would like to bring in. He's definitely found some form. I know a few people are looking to sideways some of their premiums to Walsh because of his price tag. Same to do with Steele. I mean, I'm unfortunately not in that position to do so because of the limited cash I have. But yeah, I guess it's a tough one because most people would have actually finished their sides by now. So, you'd hope so. But definitely one to consider. We'll get into the discussion point in a minute about Paddy Cripps, but what are your thoughts on? I know Spillers mentioned it on Twitter, or someone did. I'm pretty sure it was him, about potentially sideways in Cripps to Walsh. What are your thoughts on that, considering Walsh has been the more impressive counterpart? And Cripps, do you reckon it can hold if you're in that situation where you've got enough trades to offset him to someone like Walsh, or do you reckon Cripps can hold to the rest of the season just because he's been a little bit disappointing over the last couple of weeks, scoring a couple of sub-hundreds?
I'll let Jonas answer. I'll just butt in real quick and say that if you're going to do that, this is the week to do it, because Sam Walsh, and there's only a 40k price difference, and Sam Walsh's break-even is 93 and Cripps is 142. So unless Cripps goes gangbusters, you would say they're probably going to move further apart. So I think this is probably the week to do it, I reckon. But that's me. You can go now, Jonas.
Would you be trading a Cripps up to another midfielder over, say, a Short up to the top 3 defender?
Probably not.
If you could do both, that'd be good. But I'd say Cripps, I mean, the issue with him at the moment is he's not hitting the heights of some of the other midfielders, but I guess Short. I mean, obviously, if Stewart wasn't banned or will be banned for the next couple of weeks, he'd be the obvious replacement for Short if you're looking in that direction. But I guess it's a tough one because, what other options have we got with regards to trading Short up if you're in that scenario? I guess Aaron Hall is one that you could take the risk on, but there's injury risk. Whereas I think many people probably won't have the money to find someone around the ballpark for Cripps. It is a tough one because, there's a lot more better options obviously in the midfield, but they're all premium, a lot more expensive. So it's a tough one to say. That I guess if you had to pick, you probably want to get rid of Short. There's been a bit of a concern over the last couple of weeks where Cripps has the ability to go 130, 140. Yeah. But he's one, I guess, that you're not desperate. Like 95 is not terrible. It's just these kind of fade outs he's having a little bit at the moment. That would be a bit annoying to have. And I guess if you're in a position that you finished off your team and you can get him up to someone else, that'd be an ideal situation. But if I were to choose between Short and Cripps to trade out, if you had that luxury this week, I'd probably say not Cripps, Short's the one to get up to someone else potentially if you wanted to, because I'd say there are some concerns with his scoring output now that he's been pushed into the midfield.
I think I don't mind going Cripps right up to Jack Steele because that's only a 16k.
Yeah, that's
I mean, I think Steele's going to probably come down again, but it's probably worth doing, to be honest.
Yeah, because Cripps has a 140 break even. I just think Steele will probably average about 115 from here on, and he's at a pretty friendly price. I wouldn't want to be spending 40k to upgrade a premium to another premium, though, because you're sort of stifling the opportunity to then do that in another case when in a few weeks, if you want to go, say, currently Cripps to Walsh, it's then going to kill your bank balance, which may affect who you can bring in when you're trading, say, a Jaden Short out. So going, say, to a Steele instead and keeping a bit of money in the bank to be able to get the best defender possible. It's what I'd prefer to do because it's hard to distinguish who's going to score more between Walsh and Steele from here on out.
Yeah, I think so too. And just before we move on from this game, there's a good conversation there about the midfielders. I'll just give another shout out to Will Brodie. So Jonas and I have been in the Will Brodie fan club all year. Another top score with 5 in the side. So I just feel sorry for anyone who doesn't have him, poor old Thomas, because he is probably just about being the best buy of the year along with Cornelio. So
just quickly on that, I don't like boasting about that pick because Tom did have him in his team, and I did recommend him, but I recommended Zeri over him. Zeri's been a fine pick, but of course, you'd rather have.
I don't think anyone saw this though. Like, did you see him being at the second highest forward in round 15? I definitely didn't.
No.
Oh yeah, that's the main thing.
Yeah. So moving on to this Geelong Richmond game, which was probably the game of the year so far, to be honest. Kind of a bit controversial. So obviously the main talking point about this is Tom Stewart. So unfortunately, I think I'm the only one that has him out of the 3 of us. So I don't know what to do with him. I actually have good bench cover, so I might be able to get away with keeping him and getting McCartan off the field. But if you had, say, 6 full defenders and you weren't in my position, say you didn't have Nick Dacos and were on the bench, say you had like 202k players, which some people might have, what would you be doing with Tom Stewart? Obviously, you've got to get rid of him in that point. Where would you be leaning towards, Jonas?
I think he's looking at least 3 to 5 weeks.
Well, he's guaranteed 3 weeks. So because he's been sent straight to the tribunal, he's got 3 weeks minimum. So I don't know who Geelong play in that stretch. I think it might be North Melbourne, Carlton, and someone else.
If you have more than 2 trades, you trade him to almost anyone you can afford. And I think the best players to buy are almost ranked at their price. So what I mean by that is Sicily is probably the number one option, and he's the most expensive, or Dawson, one of the two, whichever one you don't have. And then it progressively goes down. So then you get the next most expensive defender, whoever that is.
Jack Sinclair.
Yeah. So
And
for
then
instance,
Doherty.
there's no point playing for money. Sure, Jack Sinclair is going to drop some money, but he literally got hard tagged. He's
Yeah, he
a
did.
top defender. So at this stage in the year, there's no point trying to save some money by waiting a week to get Jack Sinclair in. If you can afford him, you get him in now. So I think, yeah, it's just a case of getting the best player that you possibly can, unless you have close to 0 trades or Nick Dacos as cover.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got Nick Dacos, but I'm just touching on that. So just point of difference here. So if we go through here, the ownership. So Sicily's in 49, Sinclair's in 34, and Doherty's the fourth one, so he's 28. And then your mate Jonas, Dawson's only at 13%. So I think if you want to go down the point of difference way, I think he'd be the way to go, Dawson.
He is almost 600k, however. So
yeah, he is. But then again, you did say that it doesn't really matter at this stage. You just need points. If you think he's the high scorer for the rest of the year, then get him in. So they're the only 4 that are above Stewart, actually. So you pretty much got a full bill of defenders. Well, are you the same boat here, Thomas?
Yeah, it's a tough one because, you'd want to keep Stewart if he was less than 3 weeks, but unfortunately, I don't think he will be. It'll be interesting what he actually gets because it was a nasty hit. He's one that, there's not many other options you can go for. As Jonas said, price is out the window. You shouldn't be looking at, Sinclair will now drop a couple, 10, 20,000, whatever it is with his break even because of his poor 2 weeks. You just got to get the best available, and I guess that'd be Dawson, Sicily. A couple others you could potentially get would be, probably Dan Houston, Bailey Dale if you're really struggling or you need maybe to free up some cash through that trade. But I think Stewart's dropped down in price a little bit still. Or maybe not too much after his 161. But, I guess it's just whoever you can get is best available. You just need to make sure that especially if you're someone that's high up in the ranks and playing for overall, that you get basically getting the best available player that you can get. And I would like to say that's potentially Dawson and Sicily. Yeah, Dawson, Sicily. I don't think anyone else is close. Too close fighting for that. Houston has probably been a pretty good year for him, but I know he's had a couple of fade outs with his scoring. And then you don't have too many other options that you probably don't have already. Sam Doherty is one that I guess is pretty cheap for what his output's capable of. And he's pretty consistent as well as an owner of him myself. But yeah, as Jonas said, Sicily and Dawson probably the way to go to get rid of him. For Stewart, sorry.
Yeah, and just quickly while we're on this game, I know this has gone a little bit longer, which probably isn't ideal. Jeremy Cameron, what do we think about him? I know you were sort of flagging this. I think it was you, Thomas, that said a few weeks ago you were going to look at one of these Geelong key forwards. Do you still think Cameron's a good pick considering he's only in 4% of teams?
He's not a bad one. He was doing very well in the first quarter, then dropped off, then ended up on a 90. But that's what we expect from him. There's someone else that I think might be a better option, having watched that game, or some of it, was Liam Baker.
Yes, I was just about to get on him as well.
Yeah, he's not a bad option at all. I think if you can afford it, Cameron and I guess what do you call it? What's his face? Obviously Hawkins did poorly this game, but I guess those ones you're taking the risk of them being key forwards. Cameron's obviously a bit more mobile and a bit more dangerous than Tom Hawkins. Every key defender is going to go on Tom Hawkins, and Cameron gets pretty much a second defender, so he's a bit more liable to get those crappy scores as Hawkins. But yeah, Baker's an interesting one just because I think now with the switch of Short Short's now going to midfield. Baker's now taken that half-back role. Even though Baker's been swung around a bit, he's just so dominant. He's a very clean footballer. Was arguably close to best on ground, but Stewart and even Nankervis. But yeah, Baker's one that I think if you're looking for someone as a bit of a POD, his role is a bit volatile. Like he can play basically anywhere on the field. But I guess Baker's the one that I would be bringing in if I was looking for a replacement, or if you're, fighting for overall or want a bit of a POD, he'd be one that would entertain that pretty heavily.
Yeah, he's 494,000. He's only 2% of sides, Liam Baker. So, I think if you can trust his role, I think he's definitely a good one. Moving on to the Saints and Swans game. This is probably a game that, Thomas, you probably don't really want to go over too much about. What about Brad Crouch? He's still only in like 4 or 5% of sides, I think. He's 550,000. He's in 4% of teams, so he's 93. So I guess it's probably a little bit down on where he was, but he's still scoring sort of okay, even with Jack Steele in the side. What do we think here? Is this just a hard pass, given the fact we've already named the other 8, or the 8 that we probably need? Jonas, I presume you're a hard pass. Thomas, I presume you're a hard pass.
Completely irrelevant. We've got some midfielders. We've got some midfielders that are falling in price.
Yeah. Thomas, are you the same? Sorry, Jonas, you cut out. Thomas?
Yeah, you just cut out for a sec. No. Yeah,
I guess just to get rid of?
Yeah. It didn't surprise me at all that his scoring was impacted slightly with Steele back in the side. I guess, yeah, he's one that, would have been nice to bring in early on when Steele was out for a little bit, but what Steele back in is just not top 8 material. Similar to a lot of other midfielders in that competition now. Just suffers a little bit with disposal efficiency, and the way the Saints are going at the moment, it's not great. And yeah, Crouch is a result of that, and I think you wouldn't be bringing him in now just because you want to make sure you bring in, the top liners, and even at a budget option, there's better options out there. I think at this point now that he's already made his money.
Yeah, and I presume we're both the same with Jake Lloyd. I know he scored 148, but he's only in 12% of the size. But I presume you're the same with him, Thomas, that passing.
Yeah, it was one that I guess for St Kilda supporters tonight to forget pretty much because of how easy the defenders were lapping up in that D50. I mean, Lloyd was having basically whatever he wanted down there. Pretty much what was happening was we kick it straight towards one of the McCartan brothers and then just lay it off to Lloyd and kick it back out again. And considering how easy they were going through, us was pretty frustrating to watch. But one person that I want to get your thoughts on, either of you, is Tom Hickey, who's back in the side now from injury. Don't think Will Adams is going to come back anytime soon just because of his brain fade against Port Adelaide. Yes. Did not play well. But what are your thoughts on Hickey? Played against Marsh, and Marsh also dominated, but obviously that's a Paddy Ryder factor with Paddy Ryder not being there. But what are your thoughts on Hickey? I think he scored essentially 100 against the English before he got injured. Seems to score incredibly well when he's a solo ruck. If you're in a scenario where you want to get rid of English this week and maybe, either that or you need a ruck spot, what are your thoughts on Hickey? 133 is very impressive. He's pretty mobile around the ground. Having said that, Swans basically killed us. But what are your thoughts on him that he scored pretty well as well before his injuries? Or is there too much risk with concern to injury with Hickey?
If you're there, Jonas, you can answer this.
Sure. Yeah, I wouldn't be entertaining the move. At this point in the year, we're trying to pick players just to finish off the year strongly, and he's one where, whilst his scoring is good in patches, he's so injury prone. Didn't he just return from injury as well?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, this was his first game back.
There you go. So, I'd be looking at some other ruckman if you're that way inclined, like a Darcy or a McInerney, something like that. I wouldn't be going to someone so speculative.
Yeah, well, Darcy's 531,000, so you're paying extra about 70k, and you're pretty much getting a top liner. So, I think it's a no-brainer there. I think if you're gonna go down that path, I think you've got to go for Darcy or someone like that. And I guess Pod Ruckman don't really matter that much, given that we pretty much picked the same 3 or 4 Ruckman anyway, because the rest just don't score that well. But he is probably a bit lower on the selections than all the other ones, just because he keeps getting himself injured. So anyway, I don't really think there's anyone else from this game. That I'll give another clip to Isaac Heaney. He needs to lift Isaac. So moving on to this game, this North Melbourne and Adelaide game, there's probably not really anyone here worth noting. Maybe let's talk about, so just touching on that. So can we pick Riley O'Brien? So it is another option here for Team English. So Riley O'Brien, who only got dropped a few weeks ago, he's seemed to have sparked him on. I think his 3-round average is like 115 or something. Where would he rate in terms of, say, for Ruckman, say, I don't know, we get a Darcy and English to get injured. Where would O'Brien rate on your list to bring in as a Ruckman, Jonas?
I just want to make it clear, I do not advocate trading Tim English this week. If you're going to trade him, it was last week. But
yeah, I'm the same.
You have ample trades and you're in a must-win league matchup, or you're like in the top 10 of the rankings and somehow deciding to listen to this podcast and need someone to field. I don't think he's the worst option because he's proven and he's not anywhere near as injury prone as some of the other ruckmen. But I think when you're picking ruckman, it's a bit easier to decide where to go dependent on their fixture, because there's a lot of clarity on how good of a matchup a ruckman has. You know that they can't get necessarily tagged. And with Riley O'Brien, having a look at his fixture, he's got Melbourne this week, which is a pretty okay matchup given the fact that Gawn isn't playing. Hawthorn is somewhat tricky given Reeves is going to deny him of a fair few hitouts. And then having a look down the list, he does have West Coast, but Nick Nat will be playing, and North Melbourne again. He doesn't play Geelong, who he went 175 on a few weeks ago. So I think he's got a somewhat favourable fixture, so you definitely could go worse. But given that fact, he is more expensive than Sean Darcy. So I'd be leaning towards Sean Darcy over Riley O'Brien. But if you have Sean Darcy and you can't get up to, say, Jared Witts, Riley O'Brien's not the worst option. Probably better than Goldstein or something.
Yeah, I was just about to ask you about Goldstein. Is he in the same camp then? Or where would you put Goldstein and O'Brien? Would you put O'Brien ahead of Goldstein, Jonas, or behind him?
I'd put O'Brien ahead of Goldstein.
Yeah. Well, are you the same here, Thomas, with that assessment from Jonas?
Yeah, I mean, if I had a bit more money, O'Brien would have been in my calculations. He's always got the risk factor that he's been dropped before. I don't think he'll be dropped again, but there is that slight doubt that comes into mind that they've done it before. Goldstein, as an owner, is pretty happy to get a 120, and hopefully Goldstein's got this weird knack of scoring quite well against good ruckmen. He seems to nullify them pretty well and still score pretty well. He's done that for years now. I think the only risk with him is, and we spoke about this off air during the weekend, is whether Sherry comes into frame as a number one ruckman and they just press Goldstein deep forward and he doesn't do much, which he was at the start of this year. I have a feeling that might happen at some point, which is the concern that I have, but hopefully it won't be for a while, or it doesn't happen at all. It seems to be doing quite well. I mean, they score, both of them score quite well as well, which is the good thing in that loss against Adelaide. And I still reckon that at the moment he's still the dominant ruckman ahead of Sherry. He negates the tough ruckman pretty well, and he can impact the scoreboard as well. So he's one that He's still not a bad option if you need it, and if you need a ruck forward option with this whole English news, and who knows how long that goes for with a niggling concussion.
Yeah, I think so too. So moving on to the Collingwood and GWS game, which was obviously a bit of a scrappy game given it was a bit wet. But I can't believe I'm going to go with this, but if you didn't have Lockie Whitfield at the start of the year, could you bring him in now?
Yes, you can.
Can he be a top 6 defender from here?
No, but he proves to be good value, and he's being played in his rightful position under a new coach, free sort of game style. I think he's a fine pick.
Yeah, he's 400. I don't think I can, but he's 463k. He's still in 13% of teams, which is probably well down on where he was. But yeah, other than that, I don't really think there's anyone on here. I would have maybe put Taranto in there, but he
Harry
was
Himmelberg.
looked off. Pardon?
Harry Himmelberg, absolute.
Yeah, Himmelberg. So yeah, let's. I think a lot of people jumped on Himmelberg. I think this is one you've probably, if you look, you're probably not really looking for money, but he's probably, I don't know, I think he's the second highest scoring forward over the last 5 weeks or something. So yeah, in fact, he's the second highest scoring forward. So if say Bonk goes down, can we bring Himmelberg in? Where would he rank? Jonas, for you?
No, I think, yeah, you missed the bus on Himmelberg. He's scoring all right, but the danger is he gets shifted forward, which did happen at stages. And I think the risk of bringing him in was only worthwhile at 430k, not at 530. I think you're paying overs now to get him in. I'd rather be leaning towards someone like a Liberatore. If Liberatore and Himmelberg were at the same price, I would have lent towards Liberatore. But given the fact that I wanted to save some money, that was the only reason I went Himmelberg. And he's started well, but there's still that danger that he gets shifted up forward because they've got Haynes and Phil Davis back in. And whilst Haynes did start forward, he did get swapped with Himmelberg in the last quarter, and Himmelberg found himself up forward. And you don't want to be picking a player who, at 530k, you're not sure on their role and their scoring. So not worth the risk.
Yeah, I would probably go along with that. I think we all jumped on him when he was 435, so I think we're reaping the rewards of that now. I don't really think there's anyone else from this game thought there's a point of difference is probably worthwhile getting. So we'll go to the last game now. So Port Adelaide and the Gold Coast Suns. So I don't really think there's anyone here off the top of my head. Actually, maybe let's look at Ollie Wines. I think he's a bit of a point of difference. Yeah, Ollie Wines, the Brownlow medalist last year. I know we've already said the top 8, so this is probably irrelevant. But could you bring him in, say, if you're looking for a cheaper option, or do you think it's just worth going up to one of those 8 we named?
Steele's the same price, so there's your answer.
Okay, enough said. Yeah, I'll presume you're the same.
Yeah, Wines has obviously had that ridiculous run going into Brownlow form last year. But as Jonas said, Steele came back against Swans and scored 120 and seems to be close to his best. I'm hoping, he's back to his best this week. But yeah, Wines is someone that I think you have to pass on. Maybe you could bring him in and he tears it up, considering that Port is slowly getting to contention again to back into finals race and then keeping their season live barely after that win. But there's better options there. With Wines, he's always had this issue where his ceiling just hasn't been the greatest, and to hit it consistently in the 110s and 120s just hasn't been the case for him this year. But someone I want to quickly touch on, I guess, you'd be pretty crazy to do this, but someone, let me just bring it up quickly. Someone that from round 8 onwards was this low score of 88 and a high of 102. So you're not paying for his ceiling, but his consistency is Isaac Rankin. Is he one that I think if you're, I don't know what position you'd be in, but he's 436K. Is he someone that you'd be crazy to pick if you're really strapped for cash and you say, I don't know, in a position where you've got an injury and you've got 10K to spend and he's your only option? Are there better options out there in that price bracket, or do you think Rankin's worth a shout considering that Gold Coast need to win basically most games to play finals?
It's funny because we were mentioning him weeks ago at 200K, and now we're hearing him 240K at a higher price.
So you could have picked him up at a Brody price at 226K when he scored. Well, I mean, obviously this is after he scored a 3, so it probably doesn't help. But say you picked him up after that 94 at round 8, and at round 9 you picked him up for 230K. He's basically doubled in price. So he's done exactly what Brody's done. But yeah, are there crazy things out there, or is he one that, you know, if you're really strapped for cash, he's one that you believe can at least consistently hit your 80s to 90s and be an okay pick?
I'll let Nathan answer this. I just want to quickly say he did cop a pretty bad knock towards the end of the game.
Towards the end of the match as well,
which doesn't fill me with a lot of confidence. On top of that, his role is not Supercoach friendly. So for me, he's a pretty clear no. If I didn't buy him at 200K, I'm certainly not buying him at 436K.
Yeah, well, I'm just on here now. So it's the same price as Tim Taranto. So I know Taranto had a quiet game, but I still think I'd back him in to score more than Rankin most weeks. So I am on here now. I'm just having a look around. So there are some good options around his price. So if you can go for Dustin Munn, he's only 5K more. Probably not there. DeGoey, he's 8K more. Hawkins, he's 9K more. And then if you've got, say, 20 or 30K, you've got Lipinski, you've got Toby Green. So, yeah, I think if you're strapped, I think with Taranto being the same price, I think I would rather put my money on Taranto than Isaac. Anyway, so that's the last game. So just very, very quickly, I know I like doing this really early on. Have you guys got any idea yet on what you're going to do for your captain, vice captain at this stage?
I think it's pretty easy for me at this point, unless it changes with VC McRae against the Lions on Thursday night, and then captain Oliver against the Crows. I think he's projected on Supercoach at 193, which I'd be very surprised if he hit again.
Yeah. So the game's down
VC,
here on the right side.
VC McRae and Captain Oliver. What are your thoughts on your VCs and Cs?
I think you have to almost look at VCing Oliver because of how high his ceiling is. If McRae goes 130, it's an awkward spot because are you actually going to take that score? You could lose out 60 points in theory. So I'd look at VCing Oliver, and most of us have Teakle, which means you can basically leave it to the last game of the round to decide who you want to see. So for me, I'm going VC Oliver into C Darcy unless Port Adelaide bring in some sort of ruckman.
Yeah, I think just for me, I think I'll be doing the same thing. Because
I said Lyset. Yeah, because I said Lyset was potentially coming back this week. So I don't know.
I think he's more next.
Yeah, I mean, a Darcy would still score well, I'm assuming. So
yeah, I think I'm going to be doing that same thing because I can use Stranatica because I can get. So I pretty much have anyone till Sunday. But it's a shame that Tom Stewart is actually out this week because I was actually going to chuck it on him and see how he went against North Melbourne, given he could have about 50 million intercepts. But yeah, so I think I'm gonna probably do the Oliver into in fact I'm gonna change it right now so everyone can see. There you go, that's probably what I'm gonna do this week. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it.
That's fair enough. But yeah, hopefully everyone's finalised their teams now you'd be hoping to finalise your teams anyway, leading into Supercoach finals and I guess the latter half of the season. We'll probably have another couple of episodes leading towards the latter half. We'll probably change it up as well and maybe bring on some guests towards the end of the season to see how they fared as well, considering it's been a pretty topsy-turvy year. But until then, we'll catch you for the round review next round, and we'll see how we went until then.